My name's Josh Davis with the Genesis Ag podcast, and today we're very excited to have Mark Rothermich with us. Mark works out of Kansas City, Missouri, where our home office is located. Mark works in about a 150-mile radius outside of Kansas City, mostly in Kansas, Nebraska, and Iowa, Missouri. So we're very excited to have Mark here. Mark, how are things going in your part of the world?
Well, it's moving into the normal summer patterns, Josh. We've got some guys that are getting, ample rains, in some places too much, and then you go a few miles down the road and they can't catch a rain for anything. So typical summer, but a lot of crops are off to a good start, especially in the northern portion of my area. Some of the guys across Missouri and Kansas had a few more struggles getting things in the ground this spring, but, overall, we've got the heat now and things are coming along really quickly.
Good deal. So back in December, we did a series of meetings for you and your customers. They're out of the office in Kansas City, kind of had some guys come into the office, did a few days there, educating us, even learning from them. What are some takeaways that we have from that meeting that you see some things that guys have really adapted to, things that have caught on, things that guys are still asking questions about? What are some things that played out of those meetings into today?
I think probably the thing that really got everybody's attention and has been a new direction a little bit for Genesis Ag is in implementing our biological program into this seed trench in the furrow and replacing a normal starter program with this and using this as a way to jumpstart their biology in the soil. What we were finding, as we talked about at the meetings, is how letting that biology get started very early in that plant's life, getting that association established, is crucial to having it there through the rest of the season. And a lot of my guys, that really they took that to heart. And I've got a lot of customers that are, working with that on some acres. Some of my customers that have been with us a little bit longer and already kind of working with the biologicals actually went, full bore completely across their program with this, because they've seen, kind of some successes they've had with our biologicals in the past. And now they're seeing this as a great way to really get that jump started even better.
Right. So with some of the farm visits that you've had earlier this season, investigating where guys may have a check against the in-furrow biological program, what are some things you're seeing? What are some characteristics you're seeing? Not necessarily just differences in the plant, but what are you seeing in the soil that this program can start changing in that aspect as well?
Kind of going back maybe even to the past year's experiences where we've been working with our biologicals, and I've been running Haney tests and some other things to kind of check what we're finding for changes in biological activity through the season. One very consistent pattern that I found was that no matter where we started, because we were pulling samples from the control and the treated areas as baselines before we applied the products, and then coming back later in the season to see what kind of changes we're making, the most consistent pattern was that we were finding stronger gains in our biological numbers where we were implementing our programs. And that was with our broadcast system. So this year, where we moved to putting more of those products in furrow, I think we're seeing even a stronger initial response from the products. So, talking about what we've seen with the plants themselves, the root structure is just very impressive, where we've got our biological program in furrow compared to the controls. And even on small plants, I've been looking at plants earlier this season in the V4 or V5 stage. And even the above ground mass on those plants, when we check that, is consistently stronger. So, we feel like we're getting those plants off to a stronger start, building a better root system, more consistent weights in the above ground mass as well. So most guys, once they start looking at that, they get pretty excited about the changes that we're making.
Right. And two, I know from my customer's standpoint, but let me ask from your customer's standpoint, with the biological program that we put together this year, guys spending less money on their NPK inputs, just basically trading dollars to get the biological program started. What's the feedback you're getting from your guys based on what those crops are looking? You've mentioned that the root system is more robust. The plant has a little bit larger stature. What's the feedback you're getting? Because I call it a fear of loss. Whenever you ask a guy to put out less fertility, most of us farmers think that that's going to be less yield. But what we're showing in these early results in 2020 is quite the opposite, based on the plant's appearance and the root system's appearance, along with our soil's characteristics. What's some of the feedback that you're getting?
Yeah, as you mentioned, we all have this fear in our mind that backing off of our fertility in any manner at all is going to have a negative impact. So everybody's been very positive once they've seen, comparing the plants, the start that they're getting this year versus whether it be a control or just versus what they're used to. And again, when we talk, Josh, one of the things I try to make sure guys understand is we're not starving the plant. We're not trying to take away fertility that the plant needs necessarily. We're just trying to reduce the front end load of some of those nutrients so that the biology gets a chance to start. And it is a little bit of a new process, a new thought process, I guess, to more feeding that plant a little bit along the way, more, I guess, spoon feeding opportunities as much as we can, and trying to let then the native things that our environment can provide, to supplement that, with the end goal, that we can reduce the inputs on the back end without impacting yields, or at least certainly not impacting them negatively, but, maintaining yields or improving them even.
Right. So one thing you said there is less inputs, affecting less inputs. What do you see the inputs being as far as a nutrient standpoint side? Let's just say nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. If a guy jumps on this biological program, where do you see his inputs being in 3 to 5 years of getting this program kickstarted?
Well, there's a couple of components to it, Josh. I've got some customers that, just replace their starter program with our in-furrow program, biologicals, and then, reducing their nitrogen and phosphorus inputs a little bit the first year here as well, to kind of, the way I termed it this spring was we wanted to be budget neutral. We didn't want to add additional costs to their inputs. And I think the way that, the year's been kind of rolling this year, I think that's been a great position to be in. But, some of the things that we've seen in the past with people who have worked with our program for multiple years, is we've had individuals with success getting down to, on the front end, 0.7 of a pound of nitrogen per bushel. We've had individuals that can even get below that, down to 0.5 pound. We've seen instances where people have just really tried to rely on the biology alone, just in a small strip, to see what happens. And it's pretty surprising how much yield can be attained just letting Mother Nature work in a way that she's capable of doing. I'm certainly not advocating that you go out and drop your nitrogen out of your program, because it's a process getting there, and a lot of things play into how quickly those numbers can change. But not just myself, but my customers that I work with, my clients, my friends, my partners, and I still debate whether I should call them customers or clients, because most of them have turned into friends. But everybody's excited to see what we can do, and learn more about what their soils are capable of doing.
So, Mark, we've talked about the biological program and what all that entails getting started on a guy's farm. The Revita N, the morphos, and the carbos are the three components within that mix. Tell us a little bit about that in your words, what those products are doing, and what a guy should expect to see out of each product.
Sure, Josh. Those three products that we put together for this program, we've had in our system for a couple of years now, and just now really starting to put all of them together in the in-furrow program for a lot of our customers. But the Revita N is our top-end biological. It's very diverse with, a great mix of a wide variety of biology designed to kind of remediate the soils. We're putting a lot of nitrogen fixing bacteria in that product. So our goal with that, obviously, is to build the numbers in the soil of biology that can provide nitrogen and in a more natural form also, and hopefully be able to move to the point, with that a person can reduce their nitrogen inputs. The morphos product is a little bit more stronger oriented, as the name would imply, to our mycorrhizal fungi. And, not that that's the only thing in it, it's a diverse product as well. But our goal there is to try to recapture a lot of this phosphorus that most of us have applied in our fields over the years that's gotten tied up. And we know that the fungi is the most efficient and effective way at reclaiming a lot of that nutrient that's been tied up. So that's why we include that. And then the carbos is our energy source. It's a sugar, but it's way more than just a sugar. And we include that to feed the biology, especially early in the season with the in-furrow program, before that plant gets size to it and begins to exude food back to the biology. We've got the carbos there to jumpstart it and keep it working early in the season. So that's the products that we put together. That's kind of the way I like to explain why they're in the mix and what they're geared toward.
Right. So I know you've done a lot of soil tests, whether it be for nutrients or looking at a Haney test or a PLFA, kind of looking at how this program, the biological program, can be integrated into a guy's farm. You and I both have seen soil tests where the nitrate levels are through the roof, just way over threshold capacity. Kind of explain to me how the Revita N, the biological activity within that product, can help remediate the high nitrate levels in the soil, because we're being told and taught by consultants and other people in the industry who are making recommendations that you have to put on 1.2 pounds of nitrogen to get a bushel. They're not really looking at what's in the soil and how that's affecting the plant. I don't think either one of us are going to argue that it doesn't take 1.2 pounds of nitrogen to create a bushel, but it's how that plant gets it and where it gets it from is kind of where the Revita N's keys are to success. Kind of tell us what you have seen from the soil tests that you've taken and kind of go on that.
All right, sure, Josh. When you and I have both spent a lot of time in some very high yielding environments, working with some very successful producers who are certainly capable of raising very high yields. And it seems as though the mantra in the industry is you have to keep feeding more and more nutrients to make that happen. And you're right, it does take nutrients to produce those bushels. We're certainly not going to argue with that. But what and I think we're finding as a company as well, is that overloading that plant and even the industry as we've gone to more spoon feeding of nutrients. I like to actually think about our plants out here in much the same way we do the livestock that many of us still produce. We feed a different ration to a baby pig than we do when he's a feeder pig or in the finishing barn. We don't, there's a different ration that plant needs at different stages, different types of nutrients and different levels. So I think the spoon feeding portion of it, we're starting to see and interact more so with is a very good process. So the front loading of our nitrogen, we feel is not necessarily ideal. We think that it inhibits the uptake of a lot of other nutrients and some other challenges within that plant when we push those levels too high. So our goal is to be able to feed that plant a little bit more along as it needs, as it wants it. And when I look at how the biology and the whole system is designed in nature, even, that young plant doesn't need huge amounts of nitrogen. So we can feed it just a little bit then. And then when you look at the biological pattern, as a plant grows, it has more requirements. As the soils warm up, biology becomes more active. As the plant grows, it's creating many more sugars and exudates to send out. So this whole system ramps up together. And as the plant needs more, it feeds the biology more, which then increases the biology, which then can create more or capture more of the nutrients to feed it. And to me, it's a much more natural progression than a lot of the programs that we used to do, where we front loaded everything right off the bat.
So from what we've seen the last couple of years, diving deeper and deeper into things, trying to find the answers, when we see those extremely high nitrogen levels in the plant, whether our representation be off of tissue or sap analysis, or just the knowledge that we know we've dumped X number of pounds of nitrogen out there, how does that correlate in your mind to the disease and insect pressure? Because I know that's something that we combat on farms, trying to help people build biology, but then someone putting out multiple applications of a side. I know that those are necessities in the industry currently, but the more of those we put out there, the more we're going to suppress what you and I, as going on a guy's farm trying to help him promote. He is inevitably knocking those on the head to preserve his yield within that season. Kind of tell me your thoughts on that, because again, I'm not knocking a fungicide or insecticide, but knowing that suppresses biological function, how does that correlate to those high nitrogen levels in the early plant in your mind?
Yeah, Josh, that's one of the things that seems to be pretty well established, is that plants that are super high in nitrates and some scenarios like that are oftentimes targeted more by diseases and insects both. So the balance that we're all trying to get to, I mean, in a perfect world, yes, we wouldn't need any type of insecticides or fungicides. I mean, there are certainly in a lot of natural processes in place, other insects, that are beneficial. Plants have natural abilities to defend themselves if they're healthy and have the right nutrients in place to do that. But the challenge for all of us is, we built our system currently, including those products, to maintain, profitability. And it is a bit of a transition process. It'd be great if we could just all jump immediately to a biologically active, healthy environment where we didn't need those sides, as you put it. But we know that realistically, it is going to be a journey. It's going to be a process. How much impact some of those things have on the biology, we're still learning. And different products are going to have different levels of impact. So, as much as I wish I could tell you this is exactly how we're going to do it, that I guess I can't quite do that today.
Right. So jumping over to morphos, which would be the second component on there, we'll just briefly touch on this, but looking at what our standard soil test tells us, a lot of times we get a soil test back at 6 parts per million or 30 parts per million, whatever it may be. And a lot of times consultants or other people out in the industry are deeming that as deficient. You got to go put more on. You got to put more on. We've all heard my dad in meetings call it the moron theory, and hence what the name of it is. But do we really need more on? Because some of the soil tests we've been looking at, if you take your insoluble nutrient levels, we're not even 10% soluble P in the top 6 inches. So do we really need to put more out there, or do we need to be looking more heavily into a product like morphos? Because how many more years of phosphorus, commercial phosphorus, do we have left?
That's a great point, Josh. I've got, just like you mentioned, I've got customers that have P levels in a test that'll run single digits or in the teens. And, 200 miles down the road, I'll have somebody that's got P levels approaching 100. And the yields on both of those farms are within 20 bushel, and they're both well over 200 bushel. So I'm not thoroughly convinced that a person can afford to try to build their P levels and some of these things, to increase their yields enough to pay for it. And also, when we walk through the numbers of how much of the phosphorus that we apply, we actually are able to recoup the first year or in subsequent years. The efficiency of that recoverability is not really very good compared to most of the other practices we use in agriculture. So I think for me, there are, in the testing even that we've done through Genesis Ag, and I've heard other people talking about it now lately as well, that there's a huge storehouse of phosphorus in most of our soils that we're not able to tap into. And that's, in the biological studies we've done, we're kind of confirming that a lot of the biology that's most successful in releasing that tied up phosphorus is not those fungi are very depleted in our soils. So we don't even have that capability that Mother Nature has provided in our soils anymore. So that's, the morphos, I think, is a great asset. I'm excited to see, as we work with that a few years, allow that fungi to establish and multiply and grow from year to year, what we can do for our phosphorus efficiencies. And, that's not to say that we're never going to apply phosphorus again at all, but if we can improve our efficiency in recovering what we've applied, whether it be this year or from 30 years ago, that's nothing but a benefit to the producer.
Right. So we've mentioned our 2 keystone biological products, Revita N being the Cadillac of it, just for what it's doing for our current conditions, and then morphos. Tell us about the fuel behind the fire.
Yeah, carbos. I love working with carbos, and just about every one of my producers does as well. It's a very easy product to work with. It's already in liquid form. It's low use at 4 ounces per acre in most situations. you know, but it's just such a great product for feeding that biology. And, you know, we've got 4 different types of sugar in our carbos to begin with. So we're feeding a wide, you know, I like to explain it that, you know, different parts of the microbial community utilizes different sugars more effectively. So by having multiple forms, we're able to kind of get a wider bloom, we believe, in our biological activity. So that's the first part of carbos. The second part would be the fact that, you know, we have actually some bacteria in our product that helps generate additional food sources for the biology that's already there. So, you know, we're really able to give a great boost to that biology with that product. And again, it's just so simple for guys to use. They love how easy that is.
So that'll wrap up today's podcast for Genesis Ag. We want to thank Mark Rothermich for being with us and kind of conveying what's going on with he and his customers this season.